How do you turn one of your guitar ideas into a song? I'm Big Max, and this is a guide with some tips for writing and arranging instruments for beginners. To get started, I like to think about how a song has all of these different qualities that make it interesting to me. You've got melody, composition, dynamics, harmony, scale, rhythm, and more. A lot of these things describe how different instruments interact with each other, which can make it kind of hard to know where to start. So I'll use this guitar song that I wrote to show you how I go from just chords to an instrument part to a full song. What's the first step in writing? So first, I choose a tempo and a key. Usually these are determined by the genre that you want to play. In Ableton, you set the tempo up here, and you can highlight a scale down here. Next, you'll want to choose a chord progression. Again, you can look up common chord progressions for your genre, and by now you're probably wondering why I don't just YouTube to MP3 download my favorite song and upload it on my SoundCloud since I'm not doing anything original. Well, actually, the reason is I've found that the best strategy is to start with a template that works and then make it interesting by adding my own changes. For example, I'll start with chords. You can't just throw random complex chords together and expect it to sound good, unless you're Rex Orange County. I find common chords for the genre I'm working in to make a 4-bar loop. It sounds good, but not interesting. Now I can add my own ideas using a couple of different strategies. Just to show you how much you can do without switching chords, here's some guitar, and I only play in A minor. The first strategy to make basic chords sound interesting is using different voicings. A chord is just a group of notes together, and as you might know, they repeat every octave. That means that you can move any note up or down an octave without changing the chord. So I could take this D sharp and move it down an octave so that it's closer to the previous chord, and then only make it half of this chord, put the second one back up at the top. Now I think I'll move this E up an octave. A really common trick I like to use is to take the bass note and copy it down an octave to emphasize it. I guess that makes it a little more interesting, but we can do more. The next idea is to add your own chords without really changing the progression. I do this with passing chords, which only play for a short bit in between the main chords, or you can add more complex chords on top of the existing ones through a melody or strumming. Using a common chord progression and then switching it up a little bit, here's what I've got so far with my guitar song. I like how it sounds, but I think it needs something more. Arranging is taking parts played on different instruments and putting them together. I'll show you how I write different parts to complement the previous ones. In general, I like to have one instrument carrying chords, one instrument carrying the rhythm, and one carrying the melody. I do this so I don't have different parts competing for the same thing. For example, you can definitely have two parts playing melodies, but I think it's easier to have one main melody, and the second is a counter melody, which is based on fitting the first one. Here I have my guitar that plays the melody. You can see it's pretty empty right here with no movement, so that means I had room in that spot to add a little riff on the guitar playing the chords. The next idea I want to go over is harmony. Think of it the same way you do as chords, but it's different instruments interacting with each other instead of notes on the same instrument. So using chords already being played, new instruments playing the bass note will sound most natural, with fifths next, and other combinations being more complex. I'll write a bass line to go along with the guitar I already have to show you. I'll start by copying over the chords and then just keeping the bass note. Here's how that sounds. Again, it sounds good, but it's not interesting. The way I like to mix it up is have a short riff at the end of each bar where the melody has less movement, and then occasionally jump up an octave. Let me add some drums, and here it is. I like it, but it feels like I just wrote a loop. To take this and turn it into a song, we need to think about dynamics. I'm talking about how things change over time. The first thing I want to do to add dynamics is build up the loudness and drop into a big chorus. So let me just drop a utility on the master and crank up the gain. Huh, that sounded bad. Not even like a build-up. Let me explain why volume is not the same thing as loudness. Volume is just the amplitude of a sound wave. Loudness is the human perception of volume. So if we had perfect ears, they would be the same thing, but look at this graph. It's the frequency response of human hearing. For a fixed volume, this is how loud you perceive each of these sounds, meaning you hear a 10 decibel sound at 3000 Hz as being louder than one at 1000 Hz. Besides that, loudness is related to the energy of a sound wave, not necessarily its amplitude. In a spectrum graph, the energy is the area underneath the curve. So a square wave that looks like this has more energy than a sine wave with the same amplitude. Anyways, what that means for me, wanting to make a sick buildup that gets louder, is I'm not trying to turn up the volume. I'm trying to make the song take up more frequency space, especially in the higher ones. I can do this by adding things like cymbals, or a swell, or an amp to the guitar. You can change a lot more than just loudness throughout the song. Another common way to build energy is through rhythm. You can add a new melody or have a breakdown with halftime drums, change the chords, or even the tempo. This is where you get to build the song that you want, after I told you to just copy the basics. If you want to learn more about actually recording guitar, check out my last video. Next time I think I'll cover sound design tips, and if you have any other ideas, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.